It's the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to Superhuman Radio. You know, eating in harmony with your metabolism sounds like a very esoteric term. But really what it comes down to is we are all very different, even though we can probably fit ourselves into different groups of types of people. Polymorphisms and unique individual tendencies and traits make us different. And those differences play out in the way that we feed ourselves. My guest today is Jim Marlowe. And Jim has been studying nutrition now for over 30 years. Is that correct, Jim?
Yes, 34 years.
Okay, very good. And how did you evolve into this paradigm, first of all? You've been studying nutrition for over 34 years. I'm sure that you started out in a more traditional vein, like most dietitians would or nutritionists would, right?
Well, I started studying nutrition at the age of 20 because at the age of 20, Carl, I reached a point in my life where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired all the time. I was
at 20?
I was chronically ill for the first 20 years of my life.
Really?
And, yes. Yeah, I was a very sickly infant, and I had all kind of health problems growing up. And at the age of 20, I reached a point where I had just had it with doctors and all of the drugs that they were throwing at all the symptoms that I had. I had realized that although the prescription drugs I was taking helped to ameliorate my symptoms a little bit in the short run, in the long run, they made me worse, and I was feeling worse from all of the medical treatments I was getting. And at the age of 20, I was blessed with a beautiful thought that came to mind after leaving the very last doctor's appointment I ever went to from our family doctor, or with our family doctor. I had this thought that I'm going to take responsibility for my own health. And the only way I knew how to begin to do that was to begin to educate myself. And I thought at the age of 20 that nutrition had something to do with health. But
why did you start to focus on nutrition? I have my own theories, but why did you say nutrition?
Just an intuition.
Did you notice that your symptoms varied from day to day, and did you start to make the connection? Hey, what did I eat the day before, or what did I eat that day?
No. I grew up eating as if my taste buds were the most important part of my body. My favorite foods up until I was 20 years old were pizza, ice cream, fried chicken, Fannie Mae candy, and fast food burgers with French fries. I never had any doctor ask me what I was eating. I never had any of the practitioners I was seeing for any type of health problem ever even ask me about what I was eating. I had never met an adult who had given any more than just a superficial attention to nutrition. I grew up in a family, in a neighborhood, at a time when food was all about pleasure, and you ate what you enjoyed, and right. You eat what's most convenient, and if it's also enjoyable and convenient, and it's on sale, all the better. And if you happen to nourish yourself, well, that was nice, but who really cares about that? So I actually think that it was I was blessed with a touch of grace that this thought came to mind that I'm going to take responsibility for my own health, and I'm going to start to study nutrition. And so from that last doctor's appointment with our family doctor at the time, and it was just another frustrating appointment for me because he had nothing to offer me, I was beginning to ask some questions about what I could do to help myself with the chronic health problems I had, and he had nothing to offer me. And so I immediately went from that appointment to a bookstore, and I actually bought the thinnest book they had on nutrition at the time. It was called The ABC of Vitamins for Health, and I read it, and I applied some of just the simple principles that were in that book, and I noticed within a couple weeks that I was feeling better, and that was exciting because I knew I was onto something. And so I started studying nutrition at the age of 20, and I've never stopped. It's 34 years later now. I'm 54 years of age, and over the last 34 years, I have learned enough about nutrition and the other fundamentals of health, as I like to call them. And I eventually achieved a very high level of health, and I've sustained a very high level of health for a long time. But good health was an achievement for me. I definitely was not born and blessed with a healthy body.
Jim, why do you think doctors pay little or no attention to nutrition at all? Is it simply because they're not taught about it, or do they have a disdain for the notion that what you eat could have a more profound effect on you than the drugs that they're able to prescribe?
Well, one of the most important questions I've learned to ask in life about anything, Carl, is why are things the way they are? And when you ask that question about why is medicine practiced the way it's practiced, why do doctors not get any serious attention or no attention at all about nutrition in medical school? I mean, this is just absurd that there's absolutely no real attention given to the influence on the structure and functioning of the body with what people are putting into themselves every day in the way of food and drink. Are you kidding? I mean, a 4-year-old child knows that what they're eating and drinking is going to affect the way they feel.
Right.
But, why are things the way they are in the way of why is medicine practiced the way it's practiced? Well, if you really investigate that, you find that medicine is practiced the way it's practiced, not because this is the best way to help people. Forget it. That's not even a consideration. Medicine has evolved to be practiced the way it's practiced because this is the most profitable way to practice medicine. John D. Rockefeller created the MD degree. He and his people back about 100 years ago. I don't know if you're familiar with the history of the evolution of modern medicine. But John D. Rockefeller, one of the greediest people to ever walk this planet, he and his people saw the potential of having a medical establishment that was based on they were using treatments to have a medical establishment that used treatments that were ultimately derived from petroleum products. Pharmaceutical drugs to this day are typically made from petroleum products. That is the raw materials, the carbon, the hydrogen, the nitrogen. It's derived from petroleum products.
Right.
And so Rockefeller and his people saw the potential for having a medical establishment that was basically going to support the use of their products, their petroleum products. Rockefeller was Mr. Standard Oil,
right.
Tried to gain a monopoly on the oil industry, and then they saw a lot of profit potential in controlling the way medicine was practiced and having doctors oriented entirely toward using what were then called patent medicines, which
right.
were ultimately made from petroleum products.
Right.
It was all about money, profit, and especially greed. And so Rockefeller and his people, through endowments, or could also say bribes, they influenced the medical school curriculum in
right.
very, very big ways. And they up until the first decade of the 20th century, the medical school education typically was very eclectic. It gave attention to nutrition and homeopathy and herbs and cleansing processes.
And naturopathy, too. I mean, there were more naturopaths than allopaths originally.
Right. Well, naturopaths gave attention to nutrition and herbs and cleansing and they got forced out. They all got forced out after Rockefeller and his people got involved, and through their money and through putting very influential people in strategic positions and in universities and on the board of directors of universities that direct the curriculum of what the university is or the college is going to teach. They influenced what was taught in medical school, and it became entirely oriented toward drugs and surgery. And of course they learn some anatomy and physiology, and they learn a language. They learn to use terms that
were over everybody's heads. They had to have a special code, language, so that no one else could...
to make it sound like they really know something that you don't know this, so they really must know what they're talking about, because they use such big words that nobody else can understand. I mean, that's all intentional. That's all part of the myth of authority that has been created.
In fact, we did a show one time about the AMA and the history of the AMA and the journal of the AMA, which is what's the name of the journal? I can't think of it right now.
Journal of the American Medical.
Is that what it is? I thought they called it something. JAMA. Thank you. Originally, people got their information posted in there by buying advertising. There was no peer-reviewed research. It was you could publish anything you wanted as long as you bought advertising in the magazine.
Yeah.
And that gave you credibility. Once you were in the magazine, people thought, well, this is legitimate. It's in JAMA.
Well, so doctors give little or no attention to nutrition because they don't get it in medical school, and the reason they don't get it in medical school is because nutrition does not serve the profit motives of the drug companies. And basically, this may sound very cynical to many people, but I think it's very close to the truth. Most medical doctors are little more than legalized drug pushers.
Oh, of course.
They're basically just serving the interests of the drug companies.
In fact, Jim, we've talked about this numerous times on the show. If you look at the pharmaceutical model, it resembles the recreational drug model. When I was a child, I remember my father sitting me down and telling me about drugs and how the heroin pusher would give you some for free to try, because once you were hooked, you'd have to come back and buy it again. And that's exactly what pharmaceutical reps do. They go into these physicians and they say, here, give these samples to your customers, and then they'll be buying it. And it's an insidious process.
Yeah, I think there's one significant difference, though, between the street drug pushers and the pharmaceutical companies. I think the pharmaceutical companies have a much higher profit margin.
Oh,
than
absolutely.
The street drug pushers.
Absolutely. And no threat of being jailed for selling their drugs. All right, let's do this. Let's take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to pick it up. We're going to talk more about eating in harmony with your metabolism. We're talking today with Jim Marlowe. We'll be right back with more Superhuman Radio. Millions of people know that shrewd food is the smartest way to snack. Ever get that craving for crunchy snacks, but don't want to eat all those empty carbs? Well, instead of puffed corn or wheat like most snacks, Shrewd Food puffs protein powder. This gives these crazy efficient macros. 2 grams of carbs, 14 grams of protein. That's as high as 67% protein, and with only 90 calories. So knock out the carbs, but keep the amazing flavor and crunch you're looking for. Shrewd Food is now available at Walmart and Sprouts. Or go to shrnetwork.biz/shrewdfood and use the code SHR25 for 25% off your order. Merrick Health is a premium telehealth platform that connects customers with partnered providers from the comfort of your home. Merrick provides concierge service with your very own patient care provider as your health advocate. You'll go over all your needs and goals, from improving sexual function, hair loss prevention, increased muscle, fat loss, and overall improved performance. Prescribed treatment options can be ordered and shipped directly to you if you meet the requirements. All from the comfort of your home. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Merrick Health. That's MAREKHEALTH and order your comprehensives and get 10% off with code SHR. Don't forget to add the lab analysis to have results reviewed with potential over-the-counter supplements or treatment recommendations. That's shrnetwork.biz/Merrick Health and use code SHR at checkout. Or order your own desired labs with code SHR and get 10% off your first lab order. Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today. I've said numerous times that B Strong BFR bands are as effective, if not more effective, than anabolic steroids. And as someone who has used anabolic steroids for many years and used B Strong BFR bands, I know what I'm talking about. You will see changes in musculature in days and weeks using B Strong BFR bands, and without any of the risks to your health associated with anabolic steroid use. Go to shrnetwork.biz/BStrong, that's BSTRONG, and use code SHR15 to save 15% off. I guarantee you will not be disappointed in the results of using the B Strong bands. Check them out. There are lots of concerns about food supply today. That's why you need White Oak Pastures. White Oak Pastures will deliver food right to your doorstep. You don't even have to go out and be disappointed by shopping in grocery stores. The finest beef, pork, lamb, duck, and more can be found at White Oak Pastures. And now they even have seafood. And best of all, White Oak Pastures has a negative carbon footprint, which means that you don't have to feel guilty for eating your ribeye. Go to shrnetwork.biz/whiteoak and use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 15% off. There have been no real breakthroughs in resistance training for over 200 years. Whether it's pulleys or free weight, they all depend on gravity and the angles associated with gravity's effect directly on the weight. All of that has changed with the ARX machine. ARX stands for adaptive resistance. The ARX machine uses a 25 horsepower motor. You are literally fighting against a 25 horsepower motor, so every single rep is your 1 rep maximum at that moment in time. But ARX leverages another technique that has been known to produce rapid muscle gains and strength, and that is it leverages the eccentric or negative portion of the rep, which completely blows every other exercise and resistance training product out of the water. Go to shrnetwork.biz/ARX and discover the future of resistance training. So when did this paradigm really start to become clear to you, Jim? I know that when you started studying nutrition, you had to start in the traditional venues, and they usually like to lump people into categories and types and so on and so forth. When did it start to be clear to you that you couldn't do that at all?
Well, after I had been practicing nutrition and health counseling on a professional level for a number of years, I learned from experience that any particular food recommendation or dietary strategy that worked well for one person would definitely not work well for another person, and it might make a third person feel worse. Same thing with supplements. Supplements can definitely be of value. Good quality supplements can definitely help people, but a supplement that works really well for one person with a health problem, another person with the same health problem may actually get worse taking that same supplement. So the understanding that there is no one way of eating that is right for everybody is just fundamentally important if you want to create the possibility of helping everybody that you work with. And the biggest influence on our nutritional needs is really what's going on with your metabolism. I reached a point in my nutrition counseling that I knew that there was no dietary strategy, there weren't any foods, there weren't any supplements that were going to be universally beneficial for everybody. But I didn't have a system of how to identify what was going to be right for any particular person. And I was looking for a system for a long time. For a while, back in the mid-'90s, I embraced the eat right for your blood type concept.
Now, just for people out there who aren't familiar with that, could you just give a brief overview of what that is, blood type diet? Well,
Dr. Peter D'Adamo wrote a book called Eat Right for Your Blood Type, and then a number of books after that, Live Right for Your Blood Type, and so forth. And he presented the concept that the foods that were most compatible with your body and the foods that were least compatible with your body were based primarily on your blood type. There's 4 basic blood types. There's blood type O, A, B, and AB. And this concept appealed to me when I first was introduced to it because, first of all, it was acknowledging that there were at least 4 different dietary strategies that were necessary to cover the nutritional needs of everybody in our population. And so at least there were different dietary strategies offered. And what I also liked about the blood type concept is that it's pretty easy to determine a person's blood type. Very inexpensive lab test. Blood typing is never routinely done on standard blood tests, but to have that done is pretty simple, and it's inexpensive. And another really great thing about your blood type is, for all practical purposes, your blood type doesn't change.
Right.
So that's one of the static features of our physiology. And so that appealed to me, and so I enthusiastically embraced that concept and put it into practice in my own life, and then started practicing it, and unfortunately I found it to be totally unreliable. Some people seem to benefit from eating right for their blood type. Other people seem to get worse from it. And
so here's a perfect example. Here's a perfect example of eating in harmony with your metabolism.
Well, what I came to realize was that the people who actually seemed to benefit from eating right for their blood type were actually not benefiting because they were eating more in harmony with their blood type. It was because they were kind of inadvertently eating more in harmony with their metabolism. Because the results I was getting with teaching people to eat right for their blood type were so inconsistent and unreliable, I learned more about this concept of what was introduced to me at the time back in the 90s of metabolic typing. This is a concept that I had been introduced to previously, but I really wasn't attracted to it. I didn't understand it all that well when it was first introduced to me, but I got deeper into that, and as I got deeper into that, I saw the sense of it, and I started putting it into practice, and it actually made a huge positive difference. Once I understood it, and once I knew how to apply it, it made a huge positive difference in helping me to help people improve their health through nutrition. And it makes so much sense that the foods that are best for you, the foods that could be worse for you, is related mostly to your metabolism, not your blood type.
So you detailed what blood types are out there. What metabolism categories do they come up with?
Well, there's several different ways to describe the basic metabolic types, depending on what school, so to speak, that you're coming from. But I like to use the simplest terms to describe the three basic metabolic types, or three types of metabolism, and that is protein type metabolism, carbo-type metabolism, and mixed-type metabolism. If people listening to this would just do something very simple with a pen and a piece of paper, just draw like about a 9 or 10 inch horizontal line on a piece of paper. That horizontal line represents what I call the spectrum of possibilities for human metabolism. And then what you do is you draw two vertical lines through the horizontal line to kind of evenly divide the horizontal line into three equal sections. And in the left-hand section of that horizontal line, that's carbo-type metabolism. In the middle section, that's mixed-type metabolism. And in the right-hand section, that's protein-type metabolism. Those are the three basic types of metabolism. And although there's only three basic types of metabolism, there's virtually an infinite number of potential variations within each type. But knowing what basic type of metabolism you have is really valuable, because it has to do with what dietary strategy is going to be best for you. Just to keep it real simple initially here, dividing all foods that are available to us in our culture for the nourishment of our bodies into the two very general groups, animal foods and plant foods. If you're a carbo type, plant foods are going to be of primary importance for you. Vegetables and fruits are going to be potentially the most valuable health-building foods for you.
How do you know if you're a carbo type? Is there a test for it, or?
Well, yeah, there's ways of identifying what kind of metabolism you have that are actually pretty simple. The big thing is to even be aware of this concept and to get beyond the dominant dietary dogma in our culture, which is, basically one-size-fits-all recommendations. Everybody should be eating, low fat, low cholesterol, lots of whole grains
whatever,
and vegetables and fruits.
Right.
Yeah, it's just to have an understanding that there's a variety of different dietary strategies needed to cover all of the needs of all of the people in our very inhomogeneous population, and so there are ways, actually pretty simple ways of identifying whether someone is in carbo type, protein type, or a mixed type metabolism. But to just finish what I was saying about if someone is in carbo type metabolism, plant foods are going to be of primary nutritional importance. Animal foods are only going to be at best of secondary value. But for protein types, it's the opposite. For someone in protein type metabolism, animal foods are going to be of primary importance, and plant foods are only going to be at best of secondary value. And then if you're a mixed types, the starting point understanding is that animal foods and plant foods are about of equal value.
Huh. So you have three metabolic types if you're using the metabolic typing. Now, where does metabolic typing go wrong?
Well, metabolic typing, as it's taught by some people, I think is too limiting, and it tries too hard to categorize people as permanently protein type or a mixed type or a carbo type. And my experience has taught me that people, what's closer to the truth is people have metabolic tendencies more than they have a solid and firm metabolic type. Mm-hmm. Now, some people are like that. Some people are very strongly in protein type metabolism, and some people are very strongly in carbo type metabolism or mixed type metabolism. But my experience has taught me that most people actually will experience some significant fluctuation in their metabolism over the course of a year, of the season.
Are there some predictors of that shift in metabolism? Like
your own body will always let you know when your metabolism is shifting, because it's going to affect how your body responds.
But no, what I'm saying is, when I say predictors, like, in other words, well, we know that your body is always going to shift metabolism in the wintertime. Is that something that can be said easily, or?
Well, that depends. See, the thing is, the human ego is always trying to identify absolute truth. The human ego does not like uncertainty. So we're, the ego is always striving toward trying to really categorize things and trying to identify absolute truth. But most truth is relative truth, and what's true for one person is not true for another person.
Right.
What's true for you at this time in your life may not be true for you at another time in your life.
Right.
So that's why I like to use the phrase eating in harmony with your metabolism wherever it is. The thing is, your metabolism can change, and your metabolism sometimes it may change only in subtle ways and small ways, but it can change in a big way too. And so I think that it's not conducive to adapting to changes in your metabolism if you think of yourself as, I'm a protein type, or I'm a carbo type, or I'm a mixed type. Your metabolism has the potential for much more dynamic activity than your blood type. It basically has no potential for dynamic activity. Right. People don't change from blood type O to blood type A to blood type B. Your blood type is basically static, but your metabolism has definitely there's dynamic things that can go on. There's dynamic changes that can go on in your metabolism. What influences our metabolism is our genetics, for one thing.
Okay,
that's a big influence.
I want to talk about genetics in just a second, because of polymorphisms and so on and so forth. We have to take a commercial break. I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/mypillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800-889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website.
Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet makes low-carb, ketogenic dog food for dogs of all breeds and life stages. From kibble to freeze-dried and even low-carb treats, all Visionary Pet recipes are very low-carb, ketogenic, and made with 100% real meat protein. Shop now and use code SHR for 20% off your first order today. Your dog deserves the lifelong benefits of optimal nutrition. Make the switch to Visionary and see why smart dogs eat low-carb.
Never before has a product been so appropriately named as Botanic Tonics Feel Free. This plant-based elixir combines a variety of different effective compounds, all from raw plant materials that at different doses provide you with completely different experiences. A third of a bottle puts you in the zone and makes you very focused and is ideal for a non-stimulating pre-workout. It also has a mild analgesic effect for us older lifters who have soreness and little pains and aches that keep us from training as ferociously as we want. A half a bottle will create a mild euphoric effect that will allow you to forego consuming alcohol but still be socially lubricated and have fun. I have never had a product deliver on its name the way Botanic Tonics Feel Free does, and I won't ever be without it, and you shouldn't either. Go to shrnetwork.biz/feelfree and use the code SHR40 for 40% off your first order. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Some people stumble on this, I believe, and I could be wrong, Jim, but I find that some people who are very instinctive and very tuned into their bodies stumble onto this on their own.
Yes, they do.
I have the co-host of the Casual Friday show and my executive producer, Elisa Profumo, learned years and years and years ago that she did not digest red meat. And if she eats red meat, she becomes violently ill, any kind of red meat. And so she cut it out of her diet, and she's done very well without it.
Yeah, it's possible to have an allergy to a food, and that may be what's going on with her, but it could also be that she's in carbotype metabolism. She may be a career carbotype, as I call them, and red meat is really not compatible with people who are firmly in carbotype metabolism. Right.
All right, let's talk about genetics for a second. You know, there's a term thrown around in science called polymorphisms. It's, for instance, drugs that are tested in India, for instance, do not necessarily have the same results and pharmacokinetic effects that they do, let's say, in European communities. Mm-hmm. That's because the liver is different and there are unique differences about those people that make them metabolize things differently. Mm-hmm. How much of a role do polymorphisms play in this type of eating? And should we be paying more attention to what I like to call ancestral diets, looking back at our ancestors to try to unlock some of the keys?
Well, yeah, that's an influence too. I mean, the ancestral diet is basically, the genetic influence on your metabolism, and that's relevant. And I think it's important to understand that our genes are definitely a big influence that is affecting our health in a structural way, in a functional way. Of course, there's a big genetic influence, but also it's important to remember that your genes are dynamic to a certain degree. Gene expression is going on all the time. Genes are turned on, genes are turned off. Gene expression, as it's called, is influenced by a number of factors. The biggest influence on gene expression is actually what you're eating and drinking every day. Stress and environmental toxicities and your thoughts and your emotions can influence genetic expression as well. But really the biggest influence on genetic expression that we have complete control over every day of our lives is what we're putting into our bodies in the way of food or drink. And so I like to focus on self-empowering modalities when I'm working with people, self-empowering practices, and really focusing on what we do have complete control over, and any rational adult especially does have complete control over what they eat and drink every day, whether they want to acknowledge that or not.
Right.
It's unfortunate, Carl, how often I encounter people who talk about themselves in such disempowering terms. They talk about how I'm addicted to sugar, or I can't control my cravings for chocolate, or I'm a sugarholic, and people can believe whatever they want, but those are all disempowering beliefs to have, that
Right.
You can't control your own behavior in regard to what you're eating and drinking, because ultimately it is a choice that a person is making, and for a lot of people, unfortunately, it's an unconscious choice. And I try to help people raise their level of consciousness and practice about what they're eating and drinking and the rest of their self-care.
What about what are some of the indications that someone is eating against their or in a disharmonious way to their metabolism? Is it
that's easy. They're not completely satisfied with what they're eating. They need snacks in between meals. They're hungry an hour or two after eating. They have cravings. When someone is not eating in harmony with their metabolism, which is basically the same as they're not nourishing themselves the way they truly need to be nourished, it's the same thing. They're going to have cravings for something, and typically they're going to crave sugar or refined carbohydrates in some form, because that's the universal quick fix. Sugar is the most common addiction in America. Addiction to sugar is by far the most common addiction, but it's a socially accepted addiction. Most people don't take it seriously. They laugh about it. They make jokes about it. But sugar definitely is a powerfully addictive substance, and refined and processed sugar and carbohydrates are not good nutrition for anybody's body. Sugar has a drug-like effect in the body. Sugar is the most common stimulant that people use when someone is feeling low energy, low mood. If they eat some sugar, it makes them feel better for
Right.
5 minutes,
Right.
And then they crave some more sugar. But when you're not eating in harmony with your metabolism, you're going to have cravings for something.
What about gaining weight? What about inflammation?
Oh, sure.
Are these also factors that
I was covering the basic indicators for everybody, even if you don't have weight problems. How do you know whether you are or are not eating in harmony with your metabolism? Well, when you're not eating in harmony with your metabolism, you're not going to feel completely satisfied with what you're eating. Typically, you're going to have cravings for sugar or refined carbohydrates in some form. Also, your energy is typically not going to be consistently good. You're typically going to have your peaks and valleys in energy. Your mood is typically not going to be consistently good. You're probably going to take a daily mood roller coaster ride, some people more so than others. Mental clarity is very likely not to be good. I would say at least 90% of the people that I work with, when I first start working with them, before they're eating in harmony with their metabolism, they complain of some degree of what I call brain fog. Their ability to think, learn, and remember is in decline. It's something that they're worried about. It's just they have a difficult time focusing their attention, and that's also a big indicator that someone is not getting their nutrition right. They're not eating in harmony with their metabolism. And then you could add in an endless string of other indicators. For instance, someone may be overweight or even underweight if they're not eating in harmony with their metabolism. When you're eating in harmony with your metabolism, it has a balancing effect on the workings of your body. So if you're underweight, you start to put on some good quality weight. If you're overweight, you start to lose the weight, and if you lose the weight without dieting. But also, if you're not eating in harmony with your metabolism, it's only a matter of time before you start experiencing symptoms, physical, emotional, psychological symptoms that are indications that your body is not functioning very efficiently.
Like, could you point to any common disorders that seem to be popular in society today that are clearly eradicated once somebody starts eating in harmony with their metabolism?
Depression, anxiety, fatigue, digestive distress, not responding, their body not responding to exercise for if they're exercising for weight loss, or their body not responding to exercise if they're trying to build muscle. But infections, prone to chronic infections, inflammation. If your body is not getting the nourishment that it needs, there's potentially an unlimited number of symptoms that could ultimately manifest, and typically people break down first where they're genetically weakest. We all have our genetic strengths and weaknesses. None of us are perfect, and if the body is not getting everything it needs in the way of nourishment, if you're not getting your overall self-care right, it's only a matter of time before the genetic weaknesses start to manifest, and in some people it's they start breaking down first in the musculoskeletal system. They start having back problems or joint pains, just chronic aches and pains throughout the body. In other people, it's the digestive system goes down first, and they start having all kind of problems with digestive distress and with other people, it could be, it affects their mood. They struggle with depression, or they struggle with anxiety, or they struggle with fatigue. They just don't have any get up and go to do the things that
they want to
that they like to do, but they don't. They have a difficult time moving themselves. And then I ask them a lot of questions about that, and I gather a lot of relevant information. And then when I give them a nutrition plan that is specifically right for them, typically within about 4 days, they feel some significant benefits. Sometimes the benefits are more than significant. Sometimes they're dramatic. But the initial benefits that they feel are they feel more satisfied with what they're eating. Cravings are diminishing, and believe it or not, within a week, lifetime sugar cravers are amazingly free of their sugar cravings. The energy, mood, mental clarity is on an upswing. They can feel the upswing in very, very real ways within a few days to a week. And most importantly, a lot of chronic symptoms that the person has been dealing with in the way of physical problems are beginning to diminish. When the body is truly being nourished the way it needs to be nourished, I mean, that's basically equivalent to using you're using your food as your medicine now. You're using food as your medicine to strengthen yourself where you're metabolically weak, and to balance yourself where you're metabolically out of balance, and you're beginning to realize the healing potential that's within you. The body knows how to be healthy. It wants to be healthy. The body's always striving toward healing and health. If you cut yourself, it heals. You don't have to think about it. Your body's always striving toward healing and health, but it doesn't get there magically. It needs to be supported properly. And some people are much more sensitive to their nutrition than other people. Some people are blessed with very strong constitutions,
right,
to use a general term, and as long as they're meeting minimal nutritional needs, they seem to be in pretty good health.
Don't you think that's also true of youth? When you're young, your body is a lot more robust and a lot more tolerant of things that you do, but as you age, you become less tolerant to those things, and then all of a sudden, things that you were able to eat before, you can no longer eat.
Yeah, well, there's a wear and tear effect on the body. The vitality of youth is very real. It's like everything is fresh, and there's a lot to youthful energy. The energy in a young body goes a long way to compensate for a lot of especially nutritional indiscretions, but not always. I think there's a very real decline in health and vitality in the youth of America, and it's a wear and tear effect because of all the junk and all the junk food that kids eat, Dr. Weston Price and Dr. Francis Pottinger back in the 20th century proved that if people are not getting their nutrition right, this is definitely amplified in animals that have a shorter lifespan, but each generation is going to be less healthy than the previous generation.
That's what we're really discussing about when we talk about epigenetics. That's just a cool word for it now. But we talk about epigenetics. We talk about the nutritional tendencies of previous generations befall us today. So, and Pottinger and Price were right about a lot of things.
Oh yeah. In fact, when you were asking what are the indications of when someone's not eating in harmony with their metabolism, according to Weston Price, it was tooth decay. Right. It's like one of the first physical manifestations of not getting your nutrition right is that the teeth start decaying.
And if you look at Pottinger, a lot of his research, which was done on animals, showed things like homogeneity in litters, where every kitten looked exactly the same, as opposed to great variations between kittens, size and patterns. Also, organ placement, the color of the viscera. I mean, there's so many things that are affected that we just can't quantify until after we're dead. Quite often. So there's no doubt about it. You invoked Price and Pottinger. I have to take our last commercial break. When we come back, I want to ask you your opinion of a couple things. Okay. I know that you don't like to generalize. You're staunch about not generalizing because you feel that nutrition is like a fingerprint. It's unique for everyone.
Well, no, I don't buy that analogy. Our nutritional needs are unique, but the uniqueness is mostly in the details. A fingerprint is also static. A fingerprint doesn't change, but our nutritional needs can change. So I don't buy that.
Okay, I stand corrected. I have a feeling a lot of people in my audience are aware of what foods work with them and what foods work against them. I've got a couple questions for you, Jim. Are there any foods that you immediately and systematically remove from people's diets when they come in to you, other than refined sugars, I mean?
Well, any fake food, what I call fake food, any refined and processed junk. The quality of food that people are eating is of fundamental importance for everybody. And there are some nutritional practices that do have universal value for everybody. In fact, Carl, I ultimately have a teaching I call the 9 fundamental principles of the art of nutrition. And 4 of the fundamental principles of the art of nutrition have value for everybody. It's the 5 of the fundamental principles of the art of nutrition, as I teach it, though, need to be personalized. It's dependent on what's going on with your metabolism, and a number of other factors can come into play. But would you like to hear?
Yeah, I'd like to hear
9 fundamental principles of the art of nutrition?
Yes, I'd love to. Please.
Okay. Well, the 9 fundamental principles of the art of nutrition. I'll just name them all briefly, and then I'll come back and explain them in more detail. But the 9 fundamental principles of the art of nutrition, as I teach it, number 1 is intention. Number 2 is integrity. Number 3 is faithful attention to food quality issues, and those first 3 really kind of go together. And then number 4 is making the right food choices for your metabolism. Number 5 is eating the most nourishing foods for your metabolism first at every meal. The order in which you eat your foods is very important. It can be the single most important nutritional practice for some people, not for everybody. But when you have a variety of foods in front of you, what you eat first matters. The sixth fundamental principle of the art of nutrition is practicing proper food combining for your metabolism. There is no food combining practice that is applicable to everybody. Number 7 is applicable to everybody, and this has to do with how you're eating. I encourage everybody I work with, if they're not already doing so, to eat consciously. If you're not already doing so, begin to practice eating slowly and chewing your food thoroughly. Everybody can benefit from this. The eighth fundamental principle of the art of nutrition is getting the portion sizes of your protein, fats, and carbohydrates right, also known as the macronutrient ratio. How much protein, how much fat, how much carbohydrates you should eat. That's very dependent on what's going on with your metabolism. And then the ninth fundamental principle of the art of nutrition is timing. When you eat definitely matters. Those are just a quick overview of the 9 fundamental principles. Any questions about that, Carl?
Well, the food combining always comes up to me. You know, I've had these discussions with lots of different people on the show, from Dr. Lauren Cordain, who is a Paleolithic
right,
nutrition,
sure.
okay, and everybody in between. And I always say, food combining has to be a relatively new concept for the human species. I don't think that our ancestors, our prehistoric ancestors, killed a bison and then said, what would taste good with this bison? Let's go get some, lettuce. And they, I think that they ate the bison until there was no bison left to eat.
Yeah.
And then they went on and they found and foraged something else. And I'm wondering how important, I respect that. I believe that you're right. Food combining is critical. But is food combining necessary? Wouldn't it be better if we sat down at a meal and we ate this particular component at this time, and maybe a half hour later ate something else? Or am I off base on that entirely?
No, that may work for some people. In fact, that's the dietary strategy that the doctor who pioneered the field of ecological medicine, he used to recommend that.
So eating maybe your protein now, eating your carbohydrates later, eating your fruit at a certain sitting, and not combining anything.
Yeah, well, there is some value to that for some people, especially if someone has a lot of food allergies and if they have a weak digestive system. Typically, if you only eat one food at a time, that is going to be most conducive to efficient digestion of that food. But practically speaking, most people don't have to do that, and they can enjoy eating a variety of different foods, and even at the same meal. And that's more important for some people than for others. For mixed types, especially, for a mixed type to cover all of their nutritional needs and to eat in harmony with their metabolism, so they could be the healthiest mixed type they could be. Variety is going to be very important for them at every meal, more so than for people in protein type or carbo type metabolism. But there are two sides to the food combining coin. It's not only what to eat with what, but it's also what not to eat with what you're eating. For instance, if someone is in protein type metabolism, you never ever want to have some starchy carbohydrates with your protein. For instance, if you're in protein type metabolism and you're having some red meat, you definitely do not want to have that red meat on a bun or between a couple of slices of bread,
or with potato, if you eat white potato for that matter.
If you have some starchy carbohydrates as you're eating your protein, the starchy carbohydrates are going to dilute the metabolic value of that protein, and this is a really big issue. So food combining is not only what to eat with what, but it's also what not to eat. Especially when you're eating the foods that are most nutritionally valuable for your metabolism.
We're coming towards the end of the interview. A couple things I want you to weigh in on. I want to get your opinion and see where you stand. Genetically modified foods. Where do you stand?
Avoid it like the plague.
Okay. And a lot of
by the way, are genetically modified foods. Ideally, they should all be labeled. And when you're in a store and there's the little sticker on individual foods, stickers that begin with the number 9 that always indicates organic.
Yeah, the SIC code.
Do you know what number indicates that the food is genetically modified?
It's supposed to be 8, but you'll
8,
never
that's
find
right.
it. But you'll never. We've actually done a show on that, but you'll never find it because large corporations like Monsanto lobbied the government and said, "Look, there's no need for us to cause a frenzy. There's nothing wrong with these foods, and we feel that labeling them would be a frenzy." So while they created the 8 indicator, it's never been used by any grocers. Mm-hmm. So you'll never find it in the grocery store. That doesn't mean you don't have GMO food in your grocery store.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on raw, unpasteurized milk?
Raw, unpasteurized dairy products from healthy animals can be powerful health-building foods, and I would encourage everybody listening, if they don't already have a connection for raw dairy products from healthy, humanely raised, happy animals, to seek out that connection. You can go to realmilk.com. Right. And get a state-by-state listing of farmers that make their raw dairy products available.
Some states it's easier than others. We have a farmer here in Louisville, Kentucky. He's a wonderful Mennonite farmer, and he I'm part of a cow share program. I get my raw milk.
Compliments.
Yeah, raw milk, raw butter, raw cream, and at least a few times a year some raw colostrum.
Oh, beautiful! My compliments. Yeah, I was making the most of colostrum in the spring of this year myself. But I'm actually connected to 4 different raw dairy co-ops in the Chicagoland area.
Very cool, very cool. You know, Dr. Cordain was on my show not too long ago, and he's a staunch opponent of any kind of dairy. So I questioned him. I said, "Well, what about raw dairy?" And you know, he at one time years ago when I had him on the show, his attitude was, "Well, if you could find raw dairy, and it's from healthy animals, it's okay, but it's the commercial dairy that's no good." But now he's gone to a symposium of some sort abroad and came home, and he is just railing against all dairy, identifying galactose as causing cataracts. I mean, just all sorts of things. And so when he was on my show the last time, I asked him about raw dairy. And he said the problem he has, even with raw dairy, is that you have to use hormones to keep these cows producing milk. And so last couple of weeks ago, I was with my farmer, and I said, "Jay," I said, "do you use any hormones with these cows?" He goes, "No." And I said, "How do you keep them milking?" He goes, "Well," he goes, "once a cow drops a calf, it'll keep producing milk as long as you milk it." He says, "Actually, we have to dry the cow out once a year so we can have it produce another calf." He says, "Every one of my cows produces one calf a year." And that's when it dawned on me. I was like, wait a minute. When women have babies, they can produce milk for as long as they'll breastfeed. If they breastfeed for a year, 12 months, 18 months, that they will continue to produce milk. If they stop breastfeeding, they dry up. And that's when it dawned on me. You don't need hormones to stimulate milk production in cows that are calving once a year. So that's the other thing that you have to watch.
Carl, would you mind if I gave out an email address that people who live in the Chicagoland area, if there's anybody listening in Chicagoland who'd like to connect with a really great resource for raw dairy, can I give out the email address? Please,
of course. We're always supporting raw milk here.
The email address to connect with the best quality raw dairy from healthy animals that I'm aware of is you contact Max at loveforfreedom1@gmail.com, and the Love for Freedom 1 is spelled LOVE and then numerical 4 and then freedom and then numerical 1, loveforfreedom1@gmail.com.
Very cool, very cool. All right, well, listen, Jim, I want to thank you for being on the show today. This has been a very, very good interview. I'm very happy with the discussion. I'd love to invite you back, too. Anytime you have something that you want to bring to the forefront for my listeners, I would please ask you to email me, okay? Jim, thanks for being on the show today.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, so there you go. Great interview. Thanks for listening to Superhuman Radio today. We'll see you tomorrow with more. See you then.